In 2012, I remember sitting in the living room with my grandma watching the Spanish news outlet Univision. Now, in that moment, I remember seeing this picture. At that time, I did not know what this picture meant. The political aura that was behind this picture was not in my mind. I only saw Hispanic children that were trying to cross the border, who seemed to be in distress. As I grew older, however, and became more politically active and aware, I began to realize who these kids were and what the news outlet Univision was really talking about. They were talking about the reform called Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Enacted by President Obama in 2012, this reform has given a platform for young, undocumented immigrants that came to the United States as children, a platform so they could work legally and without fear of deportation. However, um, as I've explained before, as I become more politically active, I become more aware, become more understanding, and more curious about this new reform called Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which leads me to my research point, which is examining the effect of immigration legislation on recipients of Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, otherwise known as DACA. Now, to begin, we should review how the feelings of DACA were before its enactment. Now, for my review, I decided to go mainly with either conservative groups or unbiased scholarly groups. Reason being is that the Republican-controlled government are the ones that have repealed DACA, rescinded it, and also are in control of the government. So I feel like showing through their perspective how they view DACA could be more indicative of the general feeling in the government now about DACA. So now to begin, the predictions for DACA before its enactment were pretty much negative from the conservative standpoint, which is this is nonetheless shown by Stephen A. Camarota, who's the director of research at the Cato Institute, which is known for its conservative beliefs. He published a memorandum in 2010 in which he predicted the effects of DACA on the economy. So he predicted that 1.03 million illegal immigrants would enroll themselves in public education, vastly bigger than the amount that had already been in. However, and from this he was able to go and make a prediction that $6.02 billion from taxpayers would go towards these children alone, not including any other forms of financial assistance, such as financial aid, Medicare, food stamps, WIC, and other forms of government assistance. Now, however, even with this negative predictions coming from the conservatives and the conservative groups, President Obama's administration still enacted the program, and you to review the views on from conservatives have seemed over the years to be divisive. Now, this can nonetheless be shown by the percentage of conservatives, 55%, that could see themselves voting for a candidate who would keep DACA in place, which that is the majority coming from an APGFK poll, which is a very unbiased source. And also, 37% of Republicans say they would not deport illegal immigrants compared to the 24, not illegal immigrants, excuse me, DACA recipients, compared to the 24% that say they would. So, as you can see, there is a pretty good majority of conservatives that would keep DACA recipients here in this country. However, in September of 2017, President Trump's administration still moved forward with its announcement of the rescinding of DACA, and as a result of this, several groups, both conservative and liberal, came out and published their predictions for how this would affect the economy. And looking through one perspective, which is Ike Brandon, who was a member of a conservative group uh, from Princeton University, I believe, um, said forecasted a potential $60 billion loss solely coming from tax money, tax revenue, excuse me, that has been accumulated by these DACA recipients. $60 billion loss, and this is not even close to the $280 billion loss, which is predicted to happen over a span of 10 years in regards to economic growth that would be cut off if DACA recipients were to be deported. And this takes, even though this takes a very holistic kind of view, it really shows the effect and the true, um, the true results of DACA recipients on the economy. So with all this in mind, my gap started to transcend into one that distinguished between white collar DACA recipients and blue collar DACA recipients. Now, why is this so? I was able to see that most of the coverage that has been given by the mainstream media on DACA recipients has been on white collar DACA recipients. What do I mean by white collar? I mean those that are going for careers in business, lawyers, doctors, and higher degree professions. However, the DACA recipient that has been neglected by the mainstream media, for the most part, has been blue collar DACA recipients. These are the painters, the construction workers, the ones that have been here for a very substantial time and have found a living in these work departments. So with this in mind, I felt it viable and quite interesting to take a look at the opinions of blue collar DACA recipients. So from my method, I took 3 male DACA recipients from the ages of 29 to 31, and I held both a preliminary and a secondary interview. The reason I did this, the reason I took my preliminary one was to establish a background knowledge of each DACA recipient, establish their credibility, and get their first opinions on DACA and its effect on their life previous to the rescinding. And during that short span of time that between September 2017 to the point of the preliminary interviews, which were around December 2017, how they felt DACA was being treated at that point. And also, I took the secondary interview to establish a connection between the news that had been given about DACA over 2 months to their responses, so they could be both on parallels and be compared. So in coming up with the correct method to conduct this research, I concurred that a case study would be the most viable way to do this. Now, why not a survey, which is a question that I've gotten a lot. For me, the case study would allow for a more detailed description as well as a more face-to-face interactive type of interview, and therefore type of results. More interactive, more detailed type of results, and would come from this, in my belief, from the case study, and that is what came about. Now, from my preliminary interviews, I was able to grab some common background. Now, from both results of the preliminary and secondary, I want to take it into a more holistic manner, just so that it could show that if all of them think that, it could be more indicative of how the general population of DACA recipients around the country feel. If 3 out of 3 DACA recipients feel that way and have that same background, it could be a more a more indicative type of result. So 3 common backgrounds that came from the preliminary interviews were that they all were from Central American countries. They were all brought here by their parents, not and 2 of them said that they were agreed to it and they had mustered a way to get here, and one of them, a participant B, said that it was kind of not their decision. They didn't really know and what was to expect from this country, so they just came because their parents said so. Also, all came before the age of 18, which is very important because as an 18-year-old in this country, you're considered to be an adult, but they all came before that age, so they were able to experience some level of schooling. Now, my results, again, taken in a holistic manner, show that all of them have Republican ideologies in all but immigration. Now, what does this mean? For them, all 3 of them said that their Christian background is more aligned with the ideas of Republicans on mostly every issue but immigration. Also, participant C said something very interesting, which was that he believed that white collar DACA recipients should reap more benefits and should be protected more from deportation than those of the blue collar status, such as the painters and construction workers. Now, why are these 2 things important? Well, for the first thing, it shows the participant C's response shows that a lot of maybe some blue collar DACA recipients may feel that their position in this country holds no merit or less merit than that of white collar DACA recipients, and that could be expanded further and investigated further. Also, these results could also give support to the Republican Party. How? Now, when I interviewed them, I asked them, if you had the chance to vote, how would you vote? And they said they would vote Democrat solely based on the purpose of their immigration policies. Now, why is this important? It can give a gateway to the Republican Party to gain more votes if these people become citizens, and therefore expand their platform to a bigger population, a bigger section of the American population. How credible are these results? Now, being that they only came from 3 people, their credibility is established, but it cannot really be taken into, again, a holistic manner, even though I attempted to make it into that holistic manner. However, these results could open a gateway to other researchers which have a bigger platform to expand and to go further with this research and be able to do it on a much larger scale and reach even more DACA recipients. Now, what other limitations hampered the efficiency of this experiment? Only one other limitation which was significant was that of time restraint. In order to create a very efficient research paper and oral defense, certain guidelines were given by my administrators to make sure that I was able to make the assignments in time. However, the due dates for these certain projects were before the March 5th rescinding. So I had to do my secondary interviews before the March 5th rescinding. Therefore, I would not be able to elaborate further on that date in terms of my interview questions, since that date had not been reached yet. However, it is very important to know and to see that that date really had ended up having no merit and no real significance. However, that would have also given me more questions to ask and be able to expand my results even further. Now, how can other research be modeled by this study? Like I said before, researchers can take the results from the responses of these three DACA recipients, and be able to ask questions to several more DACA recipients if they have that kind of platform, um, and do it on a much larger scale, therefore getting results that are more indicative of how the general population of DACA recipients actually feel. Surveys may also be a efficient way to do it, but like I said, case studies provide more of a face-to-face interaction. Therefore, um, therefore, could provide more detail to results. So my conclusion would be one of hope. Now, I asked these DACA recipients a daunting question, which was if they were afraid of deportation, and all of them surprisingly said no. They believed in this one principle, which was that if you do no harm to anyone and you stay quiet and do what you want to do, no harm will come on to you. If their belief is that if they go to work, they work, they come back home, and they don't disrupt public safety, public discourse, and just live their lives enclosed, their want and their desire for success could help them achieve what they all called the American dream, which was to get money to make a better life for themselves. And that has given hope to me and to several other people that have listened to these results. Thank you again for listening and taking the time to understand and see how these DACA recipients really felt.